Family. It's a word that's supposed to mean something. It's supposed to be about love, connection, loyalty. But for me, family has always felt more like an obligation, a weight that I've carried throughout my life without ever fully understanding why. And it all started the day my father remarried, bringing with him a woman who had her own daughter, my new stepsister, Amanda. I was barely a teenager when they moved in. My mom had passed away a few years earlier, and though my father had done his best to raise me, I could tell that he was struggling. When he met Amanda's mom, I remember thinking that maybe this was what he needed, someone to help fill the void in our lives. But what I didn't realize at the time was that this new family would come with its own challenges, ones that would shape the rest of my life. From the moment Amanda stepped into our home, she made it clear that I wasn't part of her family. She was older than me by a few years, and she carried herself with the confidence that I lacked at the time. She never said anything outright at first. It was more in the way she looked at me, the way she ignored me whenever her mother and my father weren't around. It didn't take long for the subtle glances and cold shoulders to turn into open hostility. "You're not my sister," Amanda would say with a sneer whenever I tried to join in on a conversation. "We're not really family." Those words stung. As a kid who had already lost one parent, the idea of family was fragile to me. I clung to the hope that maybe, in time, Amanda and I could grow close. But that hope quickly faded as it became clear that Amanda had no intention of accepting me into her life. Still, I tried to make the best of the situation. My father was happy, and for a while, that was enough for me. But as the years passed, the distance between Amanda and me only grew wider. She lived her life as though I didn't exist, and I learned to do the same with her. By the time we reached adulthood, Amanda and I had settled into a kind of unspoken truce. We tolerated each other, but we weren't close. She moved out not long after graduating high school and started her own family. Meanwhile, I stayed behind, living in the house I had grown up in, taking care of my father as he grew older. Dad was the only real family I had left, and when his health began to decline, I became his primary caregiver. Amanda, on the other hand, rarely visited. She was busy with her own life, her husband, her kids, her career. I couldn't blame her for that, I suppose. But it did hurt to see how little she cared for the man who had done so much for both of us. When Dad passed away, I was devastated. The house felt unbearably empty without him. And for a long time, I didn't know how to move forward. I had always imagined that once he was gone, Amanda and I might finally come together, that we could share our grief and find some common ground as siblings, even if we had never been close. But Amanda didn't see it that way. In fact, her absence became even more glaring after Dad's death. She didn't come to help sort through his things, didn't offer any support. It was as if, with his passing, whatever tenuous connection we had was severed for good. After my father's death, the house became mine. It wasn't a huge house, just a modest home in the same neighborhood I had lived in all my life. But it was home. Every corner of that house held memories of my childhood, of my mother and father. It was the only constant I had left, and I cherished it more than anything. Amanda, of course, didn't care about the house. She had moved on long ago, and I didn't expect her to have any interest in it. But I was wrong. One day, out of the blue, I received a phone call from Amanda. It was the first time I had heard from her in months, maybe even a year. She was polite, almost overly so, and it wasn't long before she got to the point. She wanted the house. At first, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Amanda had never shown any interest in the house before. And now, suddenly, she was acting as though it belonged to her. She talked about how it would be a perfect place for her family, how her kids needed more space, how it made sense for her to have it since it was part of her past too. But it wasn't part of her past. It was part of mine. I told her as much, reminding her that I had lived there my whole life, that it was my home now. But Amanda brushed that aside, telling me that I could always find somewhere else to live. After all, I was just one person. Her family, on the other hand, needed more space. It was clear that Amanda didn't see me as anything more than an obstacle standing in the way of what she wanted. She didn't care about my connection to the house or the memories it held for me. To her, it was just property, something she believed she had a right to. Over the next few weeks, Amanda became relentless. She called me constantly, sending emails and text messages, all with the same demand. She wanted the house. She tried to guilt me, telling me that I was being selfish for holding on to it when her children needed a place to grow up. She talked about how difficult it was for her to make ends meet, how this house would solve all her problems. But I knew the truth. Amanda and her husband weren't struggling financially. They lived in a nice house in a nice neighborhood. They had everything they needed, but Amanda wanted more. She always had. Growing up, she was used to getting what she wanted, and I guess she thought that as an adult, nothing had changed. It wasn't just about the house, though. It was about control. Amanda had spent her whole life trying to assert her superiority over me, always reminding me that we weren't really family, that I didn't belong. And now, she saw an opportunity to take something from me, something that meant the world to me. But I wasn't going to let her. I had spent my whole life living in Amanda's shadow, being told that I wasn't part of the family. I had endured her coldness, her dismissive attitude, her belief that she was better than me. But this was different. This was my home, my sanctuary, and I wasn't about to give it up just because Amanda had decided she wanted it for herself. Things came to a head when Amanda showed up at the house one afternoon. I hadn't invited her, and I wasn't expecting her. But there she was, standing on the front porch with a look of determination on her face. She didn't waste any time. She launched into a speech about how it was only fair that she and her family move into the house, how I didn't need all this space, and how I should be willing to do what was right for the family. For the family. I couldn't help but laugh at that. Amanda had spent her entire life telling me I wasn't part of the family, that I didn't matter, that I wasn't her sister. And now, when it suited her, she was suddenly trying to appeal to the idea of family, as if that would change anything. I stood my ground, telling her firmly that the house was mine and I wasn't going to give it up. I had worked hard to keep the house, to maintain it, and I wasn't about to let her take it from me. But Amanda wasn't used to being told no. Her polite facade quickly crumbled, and she became angry, accusing me of being selfish, of not caring about her children. She even went as far as to say that I didn't deserve the house, that I was wasting it by living there alone. She insisted that her family needed it more than I did, and she gave me an ultimatum. Either I agreed to sell the house to her, or she would take legal action to force me out. The threat of legal action shook me. I knew Amanda had the resources to make my life difficult, and the thought of losing my home to her was terrifying. But I also knew that I couldn't give in. This house was more than just a piece of property to me. It was the last connection I had to my parents, to my past, to the life I had built. I wasn't going to let Amanda take that away from me, no matter how hard she tried. I sought legal advice, and thankfully, I was told that Amanda didn't have a leg to stand on. The house was legally mine, and there was nothing she could do to take it from me. But that didn't stop her from trying. For months, Amanda continued her campaign to get the house, alternating between guilt trips and threats. She even went as far as to spread rumors among our extended family, painting me as the villain who was refusing to help her in her time of need. But I refused to budge. The emotional toll of the situation weighed heavily on me. It was exhausting, constantly having to defend my right to the home that had been mine for so long. But I knew that if I gave in, I would regret it for the rest of my life. Conclusion: family by name only. Eventually, Amanda realized that she wasn't going to win. She stopped calling, stopped showing up unannounced. The legal threats never materialized. And slowly but surely, she faded out of my life once again. In the end, I was left with the house, and the realization that Amanda and I were never truly family, not in the way that mattered. Anyway, family isn't just about blood or marriage. It's about love, respect, and support. And Amanda had never offered me any of those things. She had always said I wasn't part of the family. And in a way, she was right. But what she didn't realize was that I didn't need her validation to know my worth. I had built my own life, created my own family through the friends and relationships that truly mattered. And as I sit in my home now, surrounded by the memories of my parents and the life I've created, I know that I made the right decision. The house is mine, and so is my peace of mind.